So you have an enduro bike and just the one bike, but you fancy something a bit more cross-country, maybe down-country, or something that is a little bit more all-day riding capable. Well, with a few setup tweaks and some choice upgrades, I think we can make that happen with this bike. Let me show you how. This is my enduro bike. It is designed to eat the gnarliest of descents on the trail. The suspension, the wheels, the tyres all help this bike be the best in its category, but those things can hold it back from being an all-day riding machine. But we can tweak those things, so let's break them down right now. Don't forget to like this video if you want more helpful tips in the future. This is my Orbea Rallon. It is an out-and-out enduro machine. So a lot of enduro bikes tend to have a much slacker geometry than, say, a cross-country or down-country bike. So my Orbea Rallon has a 63.5 degree head angle in comparison to the Okuma SL, which has around about a 65 degree head angle. Now, the reason being is that for enduro, we're trying to give a more controlled and confidence-inspiring feel to the front of our bike. That slack head angle is slowing down our steering and giving us more control on the fast descents. But when it comes to cross country, that slack head angle and that slow feeling can just feel a little less responsive. So to bridge the gap, we can make some adjustments. Often bikes will have flip chips or linkages that you can change in order to make the geometry slightly more aggressive and less slack, and that will certainly help. There's also some gadgets out there. It may be possible to give yourself headset cups that give you a steeper head angle. Or if, like me, you're in a mixed wheel setup, even changing the wheel size at the back can address some of those slack angles, which is probably what I'm going to do on this. So the Rallon has 170 mils of travel up front and 167 in the rear. Now for enduro, that is there, so the more travel you get, the more it can absorb the energy from rough descents and fast trails. And that's great. But when it comes to all-day riding, you'll tend to see more like 140 or less on a bike for that specific genre. And the reason being is because when you're all-day riding and you're doing more pedaling, more exertion up the hills, then long travel can potentially sap the energy from you instead of the trail. Now, some frames, you can't actually change the travel. So on my Rallon, it has to be 170. I can't go any lower. But you can potentially change to a lighter fork if you wanted to. So for example, if your bike was a 160, maybe you have Fox 38s in a 160 length, you could change over to something like a Fox 36 in a 160 travel. And they are actually about 400 grams lighter than the 38. So you do save a bit of weight there. Personally, I don't think weight is everything, especially when it's just on the main part of your bike. What I would say is play around with air pressure first. So the Fox 38s go for a 15 to 20% sag as recommended by Fox. Now, if you were to err on more of the side of 15% and add a little bit more air, then that gives you a bit more resistance, a slightly firmer fork that is less likely to sap the energy from you. And it could give it a more poppy, playful feel. You could also experiment with putting spacers in your forks or your air cans so that it ramps up and gives you a more progressive suspension feel as you go through the travel. And that may go towards giving it a more trail feel and a less enduro feel too. So we have done some videos on putting tokens in your suspension, so do check those out. So earlier I I mentioned, you could potentially save 400 grams by swapping out your forks for something lighter, but I don't think it makes a big enough difference to justify the cost on that part. So for example, 400 grams is like 400 mils of water at the start of your ride and then having nothing at the end. And would you notice that difference in performance? Probably not. However, if you were to lose that 400 grams in your wheels, you would notice a difference. I almost guarantee it. The reason being due to what we call rolling mass. Now, rolling mass is the weight of something that is moving in your bike. It is the wheels which is driving your bike. Now, the heavier a wheel, the more energy it's going to require from you to power that bike. More specifically, to accelerate from standstill or to accelerate uphill. Now, in Enduro, we don't worry about the weight of our wheels too much because when we're speeding down descents, we have gravity on our side. And also having extra weight in our wheels and our tires is usually as a result of more important things like puncture protection or sidewall support for offering us a little support into fast corners, and also just wider rims, taking bigger tires and being stronger to resist those gnarly descents. However, when it comes to all-day riding and XC riding, lighter means it will be easier to accelerate and easier to climb. So we can lose some weight in our wheels and our tires, and that would make a massive difference to all-day performance. Let me break it down a little bit more. So I've got two wheel sets from the same brand here, Reynolds. Now I've got some Black Label Enduro wheels here on my Rallon, and depending on the size that you choose and the hub specifics that you go for is roughly 1900 grams, and for the XC equivalent is roughly 1500 grams. So we're saving 400 grams there in rolling mass to start with. Now, I'm not saying you need to go out and buy brand new top of the range XC wheels. You might be able to purchase something secondhand online, but that will go a long way to giving you a much lighter bike, but a lightness in a place where it actually makes a difference. So on the back here, I've got a Vittoria Mazza, and in an Enduro casing, which is their toughest casing, their most Enduro specific casing, this is around about 1300 grams, depending on the width and the size that you go for. Whereas an XC tire like this is the Mezcal, this is around about 750 grams. So almost half the weight. Now, obviously there's a lot less material because there's less tread. With an Enduro tire, you need more grip, more aggressive tread patterns for stopping power, as well as control at speeds in the descents. Whereas for XC, we can afford slightly lighter casing, more supple casing, and a lower profile tread because it's more inclined to be fast rolling rather than needing the aggressive tread that we do on Enduro. And all of this, the casing, the tread, the materials needed for the XC, or the lack of materials essentially, is what makes it lighter. Now, this wouldn't be a great tire for Enduro. It probably wouldn't have great stopping power or control on fast descents, and it might puncture easily. But when it comes to all-day rides, this will be so much lighter, so much faster accelerating, and the rolling resistance will be so low, it will feel a lot faster as well. So changing your tires makes a huge bit of difference. On my particular bike, as I mentioned earlier, I've got a mixed wheel setup, which means I've got a 27.5 inch wheel in the back, 29 in the front. Now, having a smaller wheel on the back affords me a little bit more space at the back here when I'm doing steep descents, and it's also really quite nimble when it comes to sharp and fast corners, and I love that for Enduro. But we've got to remember that this rear wheel here is another cog in our drivetrain, effectively. Now, moving up into a bigger wheel will change how the bike accelerates. So having a bigger wheel, it may feel harder to accelerate from standstill, which is why I don't choose to have it in Enduro. But once it's up to speed, it gathers momentum. It has more rolling momentum. And that can be less energy sapping over an all-day ride that requires a lot more pedaling and a lot less stopping and accelerating like in Enduro. So for me, all I need to do is change the link and change the wheel and convert this into a 29er. And with the lighter wheels, the lighter rims, the lighter tires, this is going to make the biggest difference to my Enduro bike becoming an all-day trail riding machine. When I ride Enduro, often it can be all day, but my all-day Enduro rides tend to be around trail centres. They tend to have a cafe stop halfway where I can eat and top up water. But when it comes to all-day XC rides, they tend to be more epic, a bit more in the backcountry, in the back and beyond, away from civilization. So I tend to find that I need more food, more water, more clothing, more accessories, more backups than I do when I'm riding Enduro. And I think the Enduro Flames these days reflect that. So as you can see, I can only fit a 500ml water bottle in here, and that's pretty common with Enduro frames. Some will even take less than that or no bottle at all, whereas cross-country bikes tend to have a space for a bigger water bottle, maybe even 2 water bottles. So you might be at a slight disadvantage when you're out riding all day on your Enduro bike. But there's accessories that can help you along the way. So a camelback will also help you carry more tools and spares just in case anything might happen when you're out in the back and beyond and away from a potential bike shop that can help you. Now also you can get some tools that can be strapped to your bike or stored in various places in order to carry your tools without having to carry them on your back. So this bike has served me really well for Enduro, but let's give it a little makeover and see if we can make it more all-day trail ready. Wow, she already looks fast, I've got to say. So what I've done here is I've gone from mixed wheel to full 29er. So now I've got the added benefit of that rolling momentum in the back. And also because I've swapped out the wheels and the tires, I've managed to save about 1.5 kilos in overall weight. And that is my rolling mass as well. So as we discussed earlier, it should accelerate and climb a lot faster. And we've got that faster rolling tread on the back as well, which is really going to help save energy on the all-day rides. And by moving from the smaller wheel to the bigger wheel and changing the linkage, I've adjusted that geometry ever so slightly, giving me a slightly steeper head angle, steeper seat angle by about 1 degree, and also raised that bottom bracket and shortened the reach a little bit. And those tiny changes actually make a big difference when you ride it back to back. And of course, I've added a little bit of pressure in the suspension to give me a bit more of efficiency in that long travel, and honestly it does feel like a different bike. So there we have it, a whole new characteristic for my bike. And all I've done is effectively upgraded the wheels and the tyres. And I know I'm in a trail centre, but it's a cross-country trail centre here, and I can already feel those benefits on the climbs. So I can tell this is going to be much less effort on an all-day ride and an adventure out in the back and beyond. So hopefully this has given you some ideas on how you can alter your existing bike and perhaps save yourself some money by not buying a second bike and going for some upgrades instead. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and if you've tried this, if you've got one bike to rule them all with a few wheel changes and tyre changes, I want to hear about it. Let me know down in the comments below, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.